It started in a dimly lit bedroom on the outskirts of Oslo. The walls were covered with circuit diagrams, sticky notes, and half-empty cans of energy drinks. The sound of a mechanical keyboard echoed through the night like a pulse, fast, erratic, unstoppable. On the other side of the screen sat Lucas Mikkelsen, a quiet 16-year-old with a fascination for how things break, not how they work. He wasn't a hacker in the way Hollywood imagined. No hoodies, no flashing code. Just a lonely kid trying to understand the invisible threads that held the digital world together. But that curiosity would lead him into one of the most secure systems on the planet, and nearly cost him everything. It was past midnight on a rainy Thursday when Lucas stumbled upon something odd. He'd been exploring Google's bug bounty program, a legal framework that rewarded people who found vulnerabilities. For months, he'd tried and failed to find anything significant. But this time, buried in a rarely accessed developer API, he noticed a strange response. A single misplaced token, something that shouldn't have been there. His first thought was that it was a glitch. His second was that he might be staring at the digital equivalent of a loose brick in a fortress wall. He copied the request, ran it again, same result. He tweaked a few parameters, intercepted the response, and suddenly his screen filled with data. Real data. Encrypted, yes, but undeniably sensitive. He froze. It was the kind of moment that separates curiosity from crime. Lucas wasn't supposed to see this, and yet he hadn't broken any law. Not yet. His heart pounded as the rain outside hit harder, faster, like the world was warning him to stop. But he didn't. He wanted to understand what he had just found. By 2:13 a.m., Lucas had mapped the system. It was a token misconfiguration deep in Google's authentication layer, a loophole that could allow someone, with the right sequence, to impersonate any internal employee. Theoretically, it could grant access to private data, corporate dashboards, even administrative panels. Lucas couldn't believe it. He stared at the glowing code on his screen, realizing he might have found something no one else in the world had noticed. For a moment, it felt exhilarating. The rush of discovery, the invisible power in his hands. Then came the fear. He knew what could happen. In cybersecurity, intent is everything. One wrong move, and you're not a researcher, you're a criminal. So he did what he thought was right. He documented everything. Screenshots, logs, timestamps. He didn't exploit the bug. He didn't even test its full potential. Instead, he drafted a report. Short, clinical, and terrifyingly precise. At 3:40 a.m., he sent it to Google's official vulnerability address and went to bed, convinced that by morning he'd wake up to a polite thank you and maybe a reward. He didn't. 3 days later, 2 men in dark suits arrived at his high school. They weren't police. They weren't from Google either. They were intermediaries, digital security contractors who spoke in clipped, careful sentences. They asked to speak with Lucas privately. The school principal had no idea what was going on. In a small conference room lined with trophies, the men placed a folder on the table. Inside were printouts, Lucas's report, his email, his logs, even screenshots from his computer. One of them leaned forward and said, "We need to know exactly what you accessed." Lucas's stomach dropped. He tried to explain. He hadn't accessed anything. He'd just seen it. But they weren't interested in excuses. They wanted details. What commands had he used? Had he shared it with anyone? Did he still have the files? The questions came faster than he could answer. For the first time, he realized the scale of what he'd touched. Google's security division had triggered an internal alert when his report came in, the kind reserved for nation-state level intrusions. Somewhere in California, a crisis team had been mobilized because of a kid in Norway who couldn't sleep. The following week, an encrypted email arrived from Google's official security team. It was short and professional. "We've confirmed the vulnerability you reported. We appreciate your responsible disclosure. We would like to speak further about a potential reward." The number attached to that email didn't seem real. $50,000. Lucas stared at it for hours, but even as he celebrated, something inside him shifted. He wasn't proud. He was shaken. Because deep down, he knew the truth. If he had taken one more step, if curiosity had become temptation, his life could have been destroyed. The story spread quietly through cybersecurity circles. The kid who found a hole in Google. Researchers admired his discipline, how he'd stopped just before crossing the line. Google's engineers even fixed the issue within 48 hours, patching a flaw that might have cost billions if discovered by someone else. But for Lucas, the attention felt strange. He didn't want fame, he wanted answers. Why had that bug existed in the first place? How could a trillion-dollar company miss something so basic? The more he learned about digital infrastructure, the more he realized how fragile it all was. How the internet, this vast global organism, was built on trust, and how easily that trust could fracture. Months passed. Lucas went back to school. His parents still didn't understand exactly what he'd done, only that he'd helped Google with something technical. But at night, when the world went quiet and the glow of his monitor filled the room again, he found himself staring at new code, new systems, new walls to test. The thrill hadn't disappeared, it had evolved. He no longer wanted to break things, he wanted to protect them. Years later, Lucas would be recruited by one of the same cybersecurity firms that had once interrogated him. He'd work on the other side, tracing breaches, preventing attacks, mentoring kids who reminded him of himself. In interviews, he never talked about that night in Oslo. He said it wasn't about the money or the fame or even the discovery. It was about something far simpler, the line between curiosity and consequence.